start with a question today. When we love others well, what is that like? Can you describe it? What does it feel like to you? What do you notice? When we love others well, what is that like? And the next question, just as much as that one, is when we feel loved by someone, accepted for who we are, valued, honored, even cherished, what is that like? What are the markers of that? What do you notice about that? How does it change our lives? What might we learn from those kinds of experiences and the things that we notice, the markers, the checklists that can help us share our love with others more fully? Those are the thoughts that I'm bringing to you today as we dive into our text, which comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. Here begins our reading before us. You know these words very well. Jesus says, "Let me give you a new command. Love one another. In the same way I loved you, you love one another. This is how everyone will recognize you, that you are my disciples, when they see the love you have for each other." Often when I've read this passage, I've gotten hung up on that second part, right? Just as I've loved you, you should love one another. That's a really tall order from Jesus, don't you think? I want to ask myself, how could I possibly love others the way that Jesus has loved me? And I've heard these words, that is, it's not just a command per se. We have that language in there, but I like to look at them more as a challenge. But maybe I've heard it wrong. Because this is, after all, just hours before Jesus will be handed over and tried, beaten, and crucified. Hours before that. And not necessarily, as the theology goes, as payment against some wicked debt that God holds against all of us. That's not the way that it's working at all. Not just to make a just and angry God satisfied or happy. Let's leave that aside, shall we? Not because this was the only way to satisfy God's wrath or make it possible for God to forgive us. No, rather, Jesus goes to the cross to show us how much we are the beloved of God. Jesus has been extending God's forgiveness over and over, extending God's love throughout the gospel. And as John reports in the opening line of this chapter, this chapter that literally makes a turn to the second half of John's story, it starts, "Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father, and having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." That's 13 verse 1. And that's what this verse about loving one another is all about. Jesus is reminding us of just how much he loves us and how much God loved and loves through Jesus, that we might be empowered to love others. Empowered. We have the power to love others. We have the power to extend God's love throughout the world, in our words, in our deeds, in our thoughts. And in this way, love others as Jesus has loved us. Is that not revolutionary love right there? We don't have to do this perfectly, to do it meaningfully, of course. That's not what he says. He doesn't say, love others perfectly as I have loved you. Indeed, as we remember those who have loved us, and what it feels like, and what the markers of and how we notice it, we probably acknowledge that their love might not have been perfect either, but it was nevertheless powerful. So, I'd love for you today to walk with that kind of love, that God is love, that God has sent Jesus to show us that we are loved. And when we feel that love, when we mark ourselves with that love changes us and gives us power to love others. And even when we struggle to love, because we will, often for some compelling reasons, no doubt, God continues to love us and work through our lives to bless the world that God has created. That is some good news on this day. Thanks be to God.